But that's what I kept coming back to. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, why would you take this man? He's serving you so faithfully. And I'm like, why? Like, this man is good. Like, why have you taken him? But I will trust you because I really don't know any other way.
Do you find yourself wondering if this is all marriage has to offer? Are you so busy and exhausted at the end of the day that your marriage is the last thing you have energy to think about?
If you're wondering if God has more for your marriage, you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Living Marriages Podcast. My name is Aaron, pastor and marriage coach.
And I'm April, spiritual director and marriage coach. Join us as we explore simple habits for building intimacy with your spouse while learning what it means to center your marriage on Christ. Welcome to today's episode of the Living Marriages Podcast. We're really excited today to have a new friend from our church join us, and she's going to just share her story with us today. As you guys know, our listeners know we like to share people's stories. And so Christina Worthing is here today, and she's a psychologist. She works at Fuel Pain and Injury Recovery Clinic. And we chatted with her on a Sunday morning one time, and she's here to share her story of meeting the one and enjoying so many years together with her husband, Sean, and then losing him suddenly, and just the journey that she's been on and what that's looked like. So thank you so much for being with us here, Christina.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
So Christina, can you tell us a little bit about your marriage with Sean?
Yeah. We had a really good marriage together. We were together for 17 years, 14 and a half of them were married. I mean, as all people have, we have ups and downs. There were times where I questioned, I was like, what are we doing? But we really enjoyed life together. We met through playing music, not just any music, like it was worship music. So that was an awesome part that was woven throughout our marriage. But we also enjoyed playing board games, and we had adventures of traveling and living in Texas for a little bit and being with our friends and family. So overall it was really good.
What is one of the memories of Sean that you were sharing with us earlier, just something that makes you laugh and is just such a great memory of him?
It was sometimes annoying, but he was like always so enthusiastic about things. So whether it was decorating for a holiday or just gathering people to do something, like he had so much enthusiasm. It meant there was lots of joy and laughter. We played board games a lot. And one of the things that he told me, and this was a frustration at one point, but I was like, felt like he would pick on me in board games, but it was apparently because he thought I was his biggest competitor. Oh. So he was like, I have to stop you so that I can still win, basically. But it did mean, just a lot of fun together, being able to play games and then also share that joy with like our friends and stuff too.
Yeah, we've heard from a lot of friends at church that you and Sean were the board game people, and it was a real fun, fun time.
Lots of games.
We're gonna just go straight into the hard stuff. 2022. Yeah. What happened?
Yeah, so I thought we'd gotten through the worst of 2022 in the summer. Sean's mom had actually been diagnosed with cancer. She had received treatment, she had surgery, and it was looking good. And thankfully, she's still doing well. Like, she's still great. But I thought, okay, we've gotten through the worst of 2022. And then in December, at the beginning, Sean suddenly passed away. We'd both been sick with the flu. He'd had a knee injury, but there wasn't anything particularly nefarious about those things. But I guess he got a blood clot, and it was just super fast. He stayed home sick. I was working from home because we're both recovering from the flu. And he died very, very suddenly. Like, I'd seen him, and then like 40 minutes later, he had passed. I was told by the medical people that it would have happened very suddenly. So I don't think there was really much I could have done. But it was really sudden, very surprising.
It's hard to imagine that. I can't imagine it all. What did life look like following in those following weeks, months afterwards. What did you experience, and what did it look like for people to gather around you in that time?
Oh, when it first happened, I mentioned like before, I felt like I'd just been sucker punched, and then I felt like I was kicked while I was down. It just felt like I felt unmoored. I felt untethered. Like I was like no anchor point. Because I know the joke is like people talk about their spouse like, oh, the old ball and chain or being anchored down. I'm like, no, it's good. And I really missed that. And even now, like, it's much better. But sometimes I still miss having that like place that I always come back to. So I really miss, it's kind of like that safe harbor, that place. Because like, oh, I can trust this person. They know me and, you know, all those wonderful things. And suddenly that was gone. I thankfully had good support from like friends and family and stuff. Like initially lots of people were bringing me food and stuff, and somehow it always seemed to just line up when we were starting to use up some of the other food, and then something else would show up. I had a really amazing friend. I don't know if you've met Karen. She moved in with me, so just amazing support that way. And of course like contact like regularly with, you know, my parents, his parents, siblings. And my church community. Like I was volunteering with the youth group, so it was really cool just to be able to go there and still be connected and be part of something that felt kind of normal. And because I was in no shape to like work initially. You know, as a psychologist you have to be emotionally available, and I definitely was not. Finding my way into things, coping and stuff, it was weird because music was a big part of something that we did together, like Sean and I, but it was also part of something like of sharing with our whole community at church, right? Because I would lead, Sean usually played electric guitar or bass, so he was always there. So it was both, music's always been like a good reprieve for me. It's been a way to connect with God and all that. So it was still helpful. It was still hard to return to leading again, but it was still a way that I coped even at home. Like if I was feeling super anxious, it was a great way that I could refocus on God and work through some of those feelings.
Yeah. And as you're saying that, I'm remembering that the first time we heard your story was from you sharing a little bit of it from the microphone as you were up there leading worship. And I know for both myself and Aaron, it really impacted us that you had gone through such a great loss in your life, and that you were still up there, not only worshiping God yourself, but leading others in worshiping him. And so would you share a little bit about your journey that you went on with God during that time and the ups and downs of that to where you are now?
Right from when I found out Sean had died, I was just, you call the emergency services and they're there and they're doing their thing. And I'm like, okay, God, like what's going on? When I found out he died, I remember praying and just being like, okay, I don't understand any of this. But I'm going to trust you. And I don't know what that looks like. I don't know what anything is going on right now. Cause your head is spinning. You don't really know. But that's what I kept coming back to. I'm like, I don't understand. Like, why would you take this man? He's serving you so faithfully and in community, not just in our church, but he was helping out at Tagler doing some stuff or Tagler Youth Center. Yeah. And I'm like, why? Like, this man is good. Like, why have you taken him? But I will trust you because I really don't know any other way. Like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. So let's go. And so sometimes that looked like pulling out my Bible and you look up all the verses about like the brokenhearted and people who are struggling. It's like there's a lot of stuff from Psalms that ended up highlighted. Just because was really speaking to me at the time. Stories in the Old Testament, like where we're looking at Abraham and he's been promised like, God's like, I'm going to give you a son. And he's like, cool, when's this going to happen? And like waiting for years for that promise to come true. And so trusting that God is faithful and he's providing and he's taking care of not just Abraham and those people back then, but he's still doing that for us now. And so trying to walk faithfully through that, there's been lots of conversations with friends, and just there were many, probably hours of tears. Sometimes I thought I probably cried my weight in tears, but still holding on because, you know, I've gone through other difficulties in my life. Not that I would ever want people to experience depression, but I dealt with that coming out of high school and the beginning of university for the first couple of years. And I mean, one of the things I learned then was I came across Psalm 13, and it starts off, it's all bleak. It's like, how long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? And like, I'm going to die. Mm-hmm. But at the end, David comes back around. I'm assuming it's David anyway. He comes back around. He's like, but I will sing to the Lord, for he has been good to me. Mm. And so it really solidified early in, well, I shouldn't say early. I don't know. I was 18-ish, 17. It just solidified in my brain that, hey, my circumstances don't dictate who God is. And just really taking that to heart and going, okay, I will worship God because that is what he is due, and he's good and he's worth that. And so I could bring that faith and that consistency into this terrible loss and this situation, because I knew it wasn't a betrayal of God. It was because, or this is how I've come to understand it anyway. It's because we're in a fallen world and things don't always go right. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's much worse than others. Like sometimes it's just you're late because traffic sucks. And then and then other times it's earth shattering and soul crushing losses and things like that. But God is the same throughout all of that. Mm. And that's something that, I mean, thankfully I grew up in a Christian home and stuff too, so that helps. But I witnessed, you know, other people walking through difficulties, maybe not the same, but witnessing that, experiencing like my own difficulties, coming into a new season as something intensely difficult, and being like, okay, well, God has been consistent throughout all this. I can trust that he will be consistent now, even though it's really hard and I don't understand.
One thing you said during that last little bit there was you talked about crying together with people, because other people loved Sean too.
Yeah. And
so I'm wondering, during that intense time of grief, what were some ways that your community really gathered around you? And what are some ways that you felt alone, and ways that people that might be journeying with someone that's going through something like that now, that they can be there with the person that they're journeying with?
Yeah. I really appreciated like when people would genuinely ask me like, how are you doing? And not just hey, how are you doing? Mm-hmm. Okay, we're fine. Carry on, right? And offering like genuine prayers and support and stuff that way. That was really helpful. Like I said, I have to give a lot of props to my friend Karen, because she came in and was there. She probably made sure I was like eating good and like sleeping and things like that. But it was good to have a friend that was just willing to be like, hey, I'm going to do this. We're going to just do life and figure this out and meander a little bit. Because we're at the same place, we would go for walks pretty much every day, which was helpful. Also because I would feel anxious. And as a psychologist, I know that like physical activity is like good because it helps like deal with the cortisone and stuff that's in your body. So there was a very practical aspect to it, but it's also just helpful to get outside sometimes too, even when it's cold. Sorry, I'm not trying to make this like all psychology.
No, it's helpful.
It's a little bit of who I am though, right? You can't leave it behind. I appreciated like sometimes oddly enough being at youth, because like the kids probably don't really understand like, oh, what you're supposed to be doing or not doing in grief. I mean, nobody knows. Right. Nobody knows it well, but it felt like they wanted to say something about Sean. I don't think they were as shy about it as maybe sometimes adults could be. Mm-hmm. Probably just because, I don't know, less filter.
Yeah.
But it was good because then they could also process it in their own way, and we could reminisce about things that maybe had happened at youth. Mm-hmm. Oh, because we were both youth leaders. I don't know if I said that. Anyway, one of the things that I know is well-intentioned, because I've probably done it as well, is when people say, hey, let me know if you need anything.
Right.
And I have really appreciated it. But I think at the time, and what I would suggest for people also walking with but along with people dealing with grief, is make a specific plan, because saying, hey, let me know if you need anything. I mean, when you're dealing with that kind of grief, like your head is swirling, so you're not necessarily able to put everything together. But if somebody says, hey, when in the next week or two do you want to go for a walk, or when can I meet you for coffee? Like that would be like, being a little more specific is also helpful. And especially because at the time I was off work, so I'm like, my schedule is completely open basically. So if you're working, like what works for your schedule? But I wasn't in any mindset to be like, let's make a plan. So I would just say for people, if you're coming alongside somebody who's grieving or just going through a rough time of any sort, be specific or offer like a plan instead of an open invitation. I know it was 100% well-intentioned, and I don't question anybody's motives.
But we get awkward.
But it's hard.
We get awkward around grief, and I think that's why the kids have it figured out. They're not awkward. They just
absolutely.
Wow. Christina, you talked about feeling unmoored after Sean's passing, and we may have should have said this off the top, but you were not old, and Sean was not old when he passed away.
No.
How old was Sean?
38.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the benefit of seeing you in person and knowing that you're not old.
It's true. Yeah.
We talked before coming on to record too, how that sense of feeling unmoored has to do also with being a young widow. You weren't obviously planning to be single again.
Nope.
At this young age. And you talk about the journey about having to almost reinvent yourself and rediscover your place. And can you share with our listeners about that journey?
I very boldly told my friend after Sean died, I was like, well, I guess this is God's plan for me. I'm single forever. And then I said, unless God has a sense of humor. And I did come to realize, I was like, man, I presumably still have like another half of my life left to live. And I realized, I was like, I mean, if that is God's plan for me to be single, then I will accept that. But I actually realized, I was like, no, actually, I would like to be married again one day. I like having a partner. I like having that person that I'm doing life with. And like I said, like that person you can always come back to. It's like your safe place. So it's very weird though now being single, because I'd been married for so long. I say a lot of bold things looking back in hindsight where I'm like, so glad I'm not single now, because now I don't have to figure out dating in the new, I don't know how things are. And now I find myself single and trying to figure that out again. Yeah, reinventing myself, because there was a lot of things that I just did with Sean and I liked doing them, but there were, some things that I didn't do as much of because I prioritized doing things with him over like individual hobbies. It's not that I never did things I liked, because I love the stuff that I did with him, but we played a lot of very nerdy games, including Magic the Gathering. So I'll out myself now. I don't do that a lot now. Partly it was really painful at first, just because it was 100% associated with him and our time in Texas, because that's where I started, because it was a fun game we could play as two players and not necessarily with a group of people. But there's other things that I've been able to get more into, like hiking, and I do a bunch of cycling and stuff now. So like there are things that I'm like, okay, well, what is some of the stuff I've maybe abandoned? How do I figure out who I am again as a single person? Because was a long time we were together. It's also finding, okay, new friendships and new groups of people and activities and stuff, which is weird. Good, but weird.
And you mentioned something earlier as well, maybe before we started recording, about how losing your spouse at such a young age meant that you hadn't gone through some of the bigger griefs in life that often people have gone through before they lose a spouse. And so can you talk to that a little bit about just the disorientation and of that?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't really think about it immediately at the time. It's sort of been over the last couple of years that it's maybe like solidified in my brain in a way. But I think normally by the time you lose a spouse, typically, I know I'm not the only one that loses a spouse early. But by the time you do, usually you've already lost at least one parent maybe. So you've walked through watching your own parents grieve a spouse or a sibling, or like you lose your older aunts and uncles and your grandparents and all these things. While I had some grief because like my mom's sister passed away very suddenly in 2012. It was a stroke. Nobody saw that one coming. So that was sudden. That was hard, but she wasn't a regular part of my daily life, right? Whereas like Sean was in my life every day. So that was obviously significantly different, but it also just feels like life is out of order because you're like, well, and I think it would probably feel similarly for parents seeing if they have a child that dies. So I'm imagining Sean's parents also felt like things were out of order. Yeah, it just felt like, I should have already had to deal with grief in some other ways before I would have dealt with this. And also, I'm in the middle of my life, so I still need to work. I still need to pay bills. I mean, I guess everybody has to pay bills, but if you're maybe retired, we're already planning on not having a job and sustaining your life in the same way, and you're not in the middle of your mortgage, and like there's just different things like that I think, not that it's less painful. There's actually somebody else at the church whose husband died shortly after Sean did. But one of the things she said to me was, well, at least I had time to get tired of my husband. And she meant it in a humorous way, because like they'd been married for probably more years than I'd been alive at that point. And so she she meant it in like a kind way, like they'd had a good long life together, and that's what Sean and I had intended, but it didn't work out that way. But yeah.
You and Sean were big board game players. You said that a friend from church shared some insight related to board games that actually helped frame things for you. Do you want to just share that with our listeners? Because it sounded like it was very important.
Yeah. It might sound kind of silly, but it was just shortly after Sean died, and he came by and said, I feel like I'm playing a game that I never wanted to play, and I don't know any of the rules. And it did help just frame it really nicely for me. It was this nice metaphor because, I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. Nobody knew what they were supposed to be doing, but we all had to be doing this at this time. I mean, the thing being dealing with grief and all the messiness associated with it. I mean, it didn't really clear up exactly what to do, but it just really helped like feel like it had some organization where you're just like, oh, yeah, okay, it's this game and we don't know what's going on, but we have to be doing it.
Now, having lived a few years now since Sean's passing, and with this game metaphor, what are some things that you've learned about how this game is quote unquote played for yourself, and like I said earlier, for people that might be journeying with someone that has also found themselves in this game that they did not want to play? What's some wisdom that you've learned that you can share?
I would say for myself, it's this balance between initially I just was like, I need as many things consistent in my life as possible. So some of it was like, I want to get back to normal. So that was like volunteering with our youth group and like playing music at church. Eventually it was getting back to work. But in hindsight, I think it would have been smarter to maybe re-enter work a little more slowly, and or recognize I should have taken more breaks. Even if I was still working, but being like, hey, like I'm struggling. I need a break now. Can I like dodge out of it? Yeah. Which is hard to do as a psychologist though, because I also felt responsible. I'm like, I'm caring for these people. I don't want to just like disappear. But recognizing more where my limits were is probably something I would recommend to other people. And it's hard because you're like, no, I just want to keep going. And I'm appreciating more and more that we need both just like rest, which is good, but also recognizing it's okay to ask for help, whether that means you need to pull back on some responsibilities. And it's okay to let other people help you with stuff. Because I think as a culture, we tend to be like, well, you got to make things work. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And it's not even necessarily that there aren't caring people around you, but it just feels like I got to work hard. I got to do things. And but it's okay to get help from other people. So I've really tried to accept that, and I don't have to do everything on my own.
Yeah. Maybe a final question for you. You've talked about your marriage to Sean, and it sounds like it was a good, healthy, thriving marriage. And you said, I also have things to learn, or I had things to learn from there. And if I'm going to get married again, I want to be a smarter version.
Yeah.
We are a marriage podcast. Can you share with our listeners some of those things that you did learn and that you'll bring into a new marriage?
Yeah. So getting married at 24, your brain hasn't quite finished developing, and sometimes you have unrealistic expectations about stuff. So I feel like being a older version of myself, I bring a little more wisdom and more realistic expectations. Some of it is learning to pick your battles, right? Because some things are just not worth it, and it's always over dumb stuff. Like Sean would leave cupboard doors open. And at first I'd get annoyed and angry and be like, why didn't he just close it? Where I eventually learned I could just take the 2 seconds to close that cupboard door, because it really wasn't something to be upset over. Or just having expectations that you don't actually share with your spouse. So, if you think somebody should do the dishes because they are at home and they have time, you can't expect somebody to just read your brain, right? Mm-hmm. So again, saying what you need and having more clear I don't want to say expectations like I just expect people to do things in that way, but voicing those things like, oh, hey, could you do this? Instead of just imagining that they would magically know to do such a thing. It would have meant I was probably less upset in the early part of our marriage, but we got there. So, and on a funny note though, sometimes he'd also do things like leave. I think it would be, we were watching TV and he had a remote in his hand and he'd pick it up, but he'd go to the kitchen to do something. And so I found the remote in the drawer beside the oven before where the oven mitts were. And one time I found it in the fridge. And those were just actually funny moments, because I was just like, why is this here? Yeah. And learning to laugh at ourselves. That was, we always had a lot of laughter and fun, but leaning into that more rather than being upset, seeing the humor in a situation rather than being like, oh, you were out to get me and did that on purpose. No, there wasn't that. So
I love something that you said before we started recording was that, and I'm hearing this in your stories, that he might not be here on earth anymore, but he lives on in your memories and in the stories that you share about him. And I feel like we've gotten to know him even just a little bit through this conversation. And so I think that's really amazing and really neat that the memories that you have of him and that you held together, that you can carry those on, because he made an impact
absolutely
in his time here that God had him here for. And so thank you for sharing your story today. Usually we like to ask our guests if there's anybody out there that heard your story today and they want to chat with you, they want to hear more, where can they find you?
Yeah. If you want to do it on a professional level, like I said, or as was introduced, I'm a psychologist. So I work at Fuel Pain and Injury Recovery Clinic. If you search my name, you can also probably find me on Psychology Today. I have a profile on there and it has all the links for the website and ways of contacting me.
We'll put a link to that in our show notes as well, so our listeners can look you up professionally.
Yeah. And I'm also on Instagram and Facebook under Your Pain Psychologist. So I don't have a lot of stuff. I'm working on it.
Okay.
Kind of new to social media in that regard. But I think people's stories are really important. And as a psychologist, that kind of is part of what I do, is I hear people's stories and I hold them and I give them space to talk about it. So I really understand the point of let's share stories, let's be together, because we're not really meant to do life on our own. No. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Christina Worthing, thank you so much for your generosity with your story and with your time and sharing with our listeners this journey that you've been on. So thank you again.
Yeah, you're welcome. It was great. Thank you.
Thank you for the privilege of journeying with you today as we seek God's best for our marriages.
Before you go, if you've been blessed, challenged, or inspired by what you've heard today, please bless us by hitting the follow button, leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and sharing this podcast with family and friends.
You can also support this nonprofit podcast by making a charitable donation at our website, livingmarriages.com.
Until next time, praying the life, intimacy, and connection of God's love over you and your marriage.